Valerie prayed so eloquently, when we have a faith in Christ, it changes how we act. It becomes a comfort to us, but it also pushes us outward to others. And what Christians have found is that it changes not only our actions, but it changes who we are. The more we get to know Christ, the more that Christ changes who we are and really makes us the best version of ourselves that we can be. I mention that because today we're coming to the final sermon in this series of sermons called The Games We Play. And the particular set of games we're going to talk about as a metaphor today are Solitaire and Spades. As a metaphor for how we live life, how we live out our faith, we can embrace one that's sort of solitary and it's just about me and living in a loner and doing things the way that I want to do them. And that would be the Solitaire. Or Spades, of course, is a game that you play with others. And we can choose to live a life and a faith where our lives are deeply intertwined with other people. Now, it may not be a big surprise to you that the Bible is going to push us in that direction of the intertwined kind of life. And I'm going to read you a scripture that makes that very clear, but I'm also going to explain why, at least for me, the sort of do-it-yourself solitary life is really, really attractive. But before we get there, let me start with the scripture. And I'm going to take you back to the Old Testament to a book called Ecclesiastes. It is in the genre of what's called wisdom literature. There are things in the Bible that were written to impart wisdom, to give common sense, to give guidance for things that people faced in daily life. And Ecclesiastes is one of those books that does that. It's written by a man I may refer to later. His name is Qoheleth or something like that. It has a Q and an O and an L and some TH and stuff. So it's about like that. But let me read you what he says in regards to this solitaire versus spades kind of orientation to life. In chapter 4, verses 7, he says, "Again, I saw vanity under the sun." So he's looked at a whole bunch of different ways to live life and found that some are just, there's no substance to them, so he calls them vanity. He says, "I saw vanity under the sun, the case of solitary individuals without sons or brothers. Yet there is no end to all their toil, and their eyes are never satisfied with riches. For whom am I toiling, they ask, and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business." And so he's looked at all kinds of different ways that people try to find fulfillment in life, including living a sort of solitary orientation. And he has seen people work really hard to get wealth, and to find as much as they get, it never satisfies. And not only that, they work really hard to get it, sacrificing other things they might do, and find that without anyone to share it with, sons or brothers, as he says, it becomes hollow. And so he's advocating for the life that's deeply intertwined with others. But as someone who feels strongly, like really enjoys doing things on my own, I want to spend a little bit about time about how that becomes so attractive. And for me, some of you will know that I really like, when it comes to home improvement, even say like medical procedures, do it yourself is sort of my way that I want to go if I can. And okay, to brag just a little bit, I one time repaired our home furnace with a pocket knife. It was the middle of winter. The furnace would turn on and immediately turn off. I saw a future where my family froze to death in their beds. But this is how my mind works. I was going to be the hero. I was going to solve it, and it wasn't going to cost like ordering a repairman, which was another big sort of thing for me. And so did a little research, found out that sometimes it's an issue with the thermostats that measure the temperature. So I found the thermostat, I pulled it out, and the little metal leads on it were corroded. And I took my pocket knife and I scraped off the corrosion and I plugged it in, and it worked. Now, a victory like that in sort of the do-it-yourself mode, that'll sustain me for a really long time. That was like the ultimate victory. It took like 7 minutes of work. It cost nothing. It fixed the problem, and my family didn't freeze in the middle of winter in Texas. It was all really, really good. And I need those sort of victories to sustain me, because there are other do-it-yourself endeavors that don't turn out quite as well. Like the time the refrigerator broke, and I thought, I can fix this. And I did a little research, and I found a component that might have been the problem. The refrigerator would turn on, but it wouldn't get cold. And so I replaced the component, and I plugged everything back in, and the refrigerator continued to turn on but not get cold. I didn't know what else to do. Finally, in a humiliating act of contrition, I called the repair person, who came out, looked at the work that I had done, and saw the component I replaced and how the black wire went in one side and the white wire went in the other side, and he looked at it. He says, "I think I see the problem." And he pulls the wires out and swaps them, plugs it back in, and for that deeply humbling experience, he only charged me $220. But I fixed a furnace with my pocket knife. Some of you know I'm also sporting a new scar on my neck. I think like home repairs are not the only thing that are better as do-it-yourself, but also medical procedures. I noticed I had like this little patch of skin on my neck that was red, and it never seemed to get better. And I had this thought that, maybe there's like something growing there. And I did a little research, and I found out that bleach kills a lot of things. And so I took some on a cotton ball, and I put it under a Band-Aid, and I just stuck it on there. And when it really started hurting, I felt like that was an indication that it was really working. And so I left it. I don't actually know if it got rid of the red stuff, because it also got rid of all the skin there. And so now I have a little new scar that I'm sporting there on my neck. And as I've shared that story, I've gotten two reactions that I think are kind of here in the room. One, I think I've seen the eye rolling. And I've gotten that a number of places as I've shared this story, but I've got another reaction. And that is people who I've told this story, and they said, "Oh yeah, I can totally see myself doing that." There's a certain part of the population that do-it-yourself is just so intriguing and so captivating that even in things that to others look like really dumb failures, it looks like just a step along in the process of getting better. And I share that because I'm hoping today to take a few of you eye rollers and to give you perhaps just a little bit of a sympathy for those of us who approach not only do-it-yourself projects and medical procedures, but also life and faith as a loner and see the attractiveness. And so I've tried to look at myself and what it is. I've asked what motivates me to do these things at home and to my body, to do it myself. And I've come up with several things. One is the loner lifestyle, faith, life. It seems on the surface to promise freedom and adventure. If I am not tied down to anyone else or to what they want to do, I can go and do whatever I want, whenever I want. In the life of faith, worship like we're doing here, where you have to get up early on a Sunday and you get dressed on a day that it's a day off and you come and gather together. Well, if you're approaching faith as a do-it-yourself kind of endeavor, what's the point? You can go worship God by yourself out in nature or on the couch, or maybe even just sleeping in bed on Sunday mornings. And not only that, but I can convince myself not only in my faith-based actions, but in my beliefs. If it's just between me and God, I have an incredible capacity to rationalize pretty much anything I want to believe or do. And if there's no one else in my sphere of deeply intertwined lives, there's nobody to talk me out of that. And it seems like adventure and freedom for a while. But then it inevitably turns a little more painful as the sort of loner that's not looking for anyone to hold them back, that eventually becomes lonely. And in looking not to set any limits for myself except what I set, I eventually stumble upon the very things that I think are going to be so fun. And all of the things that others would have said, I don't think God would want you doing this. I find that there's actually a pretty good reason for that when I do them, I end up hurting myself or others. But that loner lifestyle seems to promise freedom and adventure. It also seems to promise control. If I'm the only one making decisions and setting my life's direction and no one else is around to influence that, then that makes it feel like I've got a lot of control over my life. And in the short time, it feels like that. It seems to work out that way. But Over the longer run, I've come to realize that there's really very few things over which we actually have control in this life. There are a few things we can influence, but actually controlling them, there are so many things out of our control, and when that illusion of control ultimately falls apart, the more I've convinced myself I was in control, the longer the fall is and the more painful the fall is when the illusion comes crashing down. Freedom and adventure, a sense of control. And ultimately, one of the big reasons that I think it's so attractive to me to live a kind of solitaire lifestyle in faith or life or otherwise is it seems safer. If I don't get too close to someone else, they can't let me down, and even more than that, they can't hurt me. And it just seems safer to just sort of go it alone sometimes. But with that too, over the long run, I found that it is an illusion to believe that I will never need someone else. And if I've spent a large chunk of my life pushing others away or withdrawing from others, when the day inevitably comes that I need someone, they're not there. But all of those things look so attractive on the surface. It's just over the long run that they come to be seen, as Qoheleth, the author of Ecclesiastes, said, insubstantial or vanities. And so he actually goes on to, he makes that point about how he sees this loner lifestyle or the solitaire lifestyle, the do-it-yourself lifestyle and faith as vanity. But he goes on in verse 9, and he just puts it very concretely. He says, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up the other, but woe to one who is alone and falls and does not have another to help. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though one might prevail against another, 2 will withstand against one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. And so he's kind of organized here. He kind of goes in a hierarchy. He says, if you have a life deeply intertwined with others, you're likely to survive longer. He talks about falling down, but if you're in the wilderness of Israel, falling down can be a life-threatening situation. And if you have a life intertwined with others, when that happens, someone's going to be there to pick you up. But he says it's not just about survival. He says this thing about 2 being able to be warm where you can't keep yourself warm. This is not about survival. You can survive if you're uncomfortable and you're cold. This is about the blessings, the additional blessings that other people in our lives bring. It's just better to be warm than to be cold. And it's better to do a whole lot of other things when you've got someone to share them with than when you are alone. And so he throws that out there. And then he talks about enemies, and I think he's actually talking about physical confrontation, which hopefully isn't a big part of any of our lives, but if you've got a team, it's easier to survive those. And something that we will all experience in life is challenges that are bigger than we are. And if we have people to face them with us, we have the opportunity to overcome them. And then at the end, he says this thing about a threefold cord. There's one person, there's the other person, and then he jumps and says 3. And many people believe this is where he's starting to recognize God's presence. The invisible yet always present with us, God, the third strand that we are welcomed and encouraged to invite into our relationships and our connections with other people, the one who, even when it looks like we are alone, we won't be because God will be with us, but also the one who will bind it all together, because as you know, it's not easy to live a life intertwined with others. And so Qoheleth says 2 are better than 1, but don't forget there's a third there always with you to help you. Now Qoheleth, to this point, he's just been kind of talking about the personal benefits. He's saying, I will have a more fulfilling life if I choose to intertwine it with others. John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, he recognized that it's not just about us having more individual lives. And I want to read something to you that John Wesley wrote. He said, "Holy solitaries is a phrase no more consistent with the gospel than holy adulterers. The gospel of Christ knows no religion but social, no holiness but social holiness. Wesley recognized that when we live life and when we live faith in community intertwined with others, God will inevitably push us outward to continually to draw the circle of what is community wider and wider. John Wesley had experienced, and he's trying to teach others, that when we live these lives of faith, not only do we become more entwined and we see the cares of the community around us and it becomes more fulfilling to us as individuals, but God inevitably, relentlessly pushes us to see the needs, not just within our church community, but beyond our church community, to see the needs and the hurts and the injustices, but not only to see them, but to experience them as our own. And then to unite to make a difference. Wesley says there is no religion, no authentic religion. There is no holiness, authentic holiness, except that which pushes us outward to inevitably expand the circles of what is our community. Many of you know that we have these partnerships in our local community with elementary schools, Mark Twain and Greenwood Hills. On your Connect card today, there are information about collecting backpacks for schools, and then the school supply drive for these schools, and also this family-friendly service day at the schools on the 12th of August. We do other things with these schools too. Throughout the year, we go and volunteer with the teachers, and we read to the students. We do all of these kinds of things. And the second most important reason why we do all of these things is to help the students and the teachers. The most important reason we do these things, the one that is at the core of who Christ is trying to change us to be, the first most important reason we do these things is so that we get to know our neighbors and we expand the circle of community. When we go and volunteer in the schools and when we help and when we work alongside the PTA members and the parents and the teachers and the staff, things like poverty and injustice, these become not just terms or stereotypes, but they become people that we know, people that we have worked beside. And when they become that, our circle of community grows wider and wider. There's an argument to be made for living life solitary. There's a pretty strong argument to be made for living it in community and intertwined. And at the risk of doing something I'm not very familiar with, I'm going to make a sports analogy. The solitary life could work really well if life was like golf, where the goal is clearly marked with a giant flag. People get out of your way when it's your turn to progress towards the goal. If it takes you 3-4 times, even more than it's supposed to, they still clap at the end. And when you approach the goal, they lift the marker out just so there's no extra obstruction. If life was like that, living as a solitary would be a pretty compelling way to do it. I have tended to experience life like another sport, which also involves a thing that you move along the ground toward a goal. You also have a stick kind of thing, hockey, where everybody's always yelling, they're bumping and pushing and shoving, and if you ever manage to get anywhere near the goal, there is one person at least whose sole job it is in the whole game is to keep you from making it to the goal. If life is a little bit more like that, I need a team, and so do other people. I want to invite the band to come back, and I also want to invite Maddie Jones to come and join me on the stage, because Maddie has been doing this kind of intertwining of life with others. Maddie's been working for Project Transformation this summer. It's a ministry group in North Texas. It's now expanding to the nation, where people like Maddie go out on their summer breaks from college and things, and they work in low-income neighborhoods, particularly to enhance literacy with the children who live there. They do summer camps and educational things, but then also for the young adults who are doing that, Friday of each week, they go and explore the types of jobs that are happening around our community that are really ministries without being the stereotypical kind of pastor thing. And so I want you to meet Maddie. And Maddie, if you would introduce yourself and tell us where you've been and what you've been doing this summer.
Yeah, so I'm Maddie. I was working at Walnut Hill United Methodist Church, and I was working with the elementary age students, which is a lot of fun.
What's some of the neatest thing that have happened this summer?
Definitely. So all of the kids that we work with do come from low-income households. A lot of them don't come from very nice neighborhoods. I know that we had a couple kids who only made it the first week because they had CPS cases that we had to deal with. And those who did make it to the end of the summer, there were still things that we didn't know about them. And so definitely there are some kids that, we knew stuff was going on, but we couldn't really do anything unless they came and was like, hey, this is happening, But those were the hardest goodbyes because, they needed us just as much as we needed them, and that was definitely a big part of what we did.
Maddie, thank you so much. Would you please thank her for what she's been doing?
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Drawing the circle of community wider, beginning to see the needs and the hurts and experiencing them as your own. That's what she's been doing. It's what we're inviting you to do on that service day on August 12th and throughout the year.